SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday Eve.
Yes, it is, and sad news to share with you this morning, and that is, unfortunately, reporting of the passing of Representative Price Wallace. Represented Simpson and Rankin counties, and just shocked at this, Rhino. I learned about it mid-afternoon yesterday, a couple hours after the show. Man, he will be incredibly missed. And what just a great Mississippian American he was. Served, of course, in the Mississippi House of Representatives. He chaired the Constitution Committee. And, Rhino, you know this. He worked his butt off to restore the ballot initiative in this state. And he got it passed multiple times in the House, but unfortunately it did not pass in the Senate. But he was committed to that. He was a man of impeccable honor and conviction, had an incredibly likable personality. Never met a stranger. And I would sit sometimes in the gallery and look down, and he'd have that big smile on his face, and he'd wave at me. And it was just always kind of cool to interact with him with those little gestures. But when they would recess or end the proceedings for the day, and I'd meet him out in the hall like I normally do as the members come out of the chamber, it was just always fun to shake his hand, talk to him. He just was always upbeat, positive. And like I said, never met a stranger. Give you the shirt off his back. Very successful farmer as well. Represented the needs of our agriculture community because he understood it. He was on the ground. But he not only, of course, was a great lawmaker, was the gentleman from Simpson, he was just a good guy. And the world needs more good guys like Price Wallace. It's Mississippi's loss. It's heaven's gain. No doubt about it. We pray for his family. And we pray for all of his friends as well. He will be sorely missed. I'll certainly miss seeing him down at the Capitol and at numerous other events as well. He just represented this state with such pride and such dignity. And that's what we need. He was just a quintessential Mississippian American patriot. We'll miss you, Price. You remember he came on the show one time, Rhino, with Representative Fred Shanks, his good buddy. They're desk mates from Rankin County. And Price was, he shared with me, he was a little nervous. And you also remember, Rhino, he would frequently text us on the text line. He would weigh in on the topics in a very succinct and often humorous way. That's the way to do it, man. And I will miss that. But he came in the studio. He wouldn't do it by himself. He wanted Representative Shanks with him. And I knew I could detect he was nervous. And you and I have been through this before. We've had a lot of people, if it's their first time in particular, and we do our best to try to soothe the nerves, and then they're fine. They always do great. It seems like the folks that talk about being the most nervous and will share, I've never been on, they do better sometimes. And that was Representative Price Wallace. And I will never forget that. And I'm so glad that we took a photo. And it was during the session. So Representative Shanks, Representative Wallace, and I, we all had our coats and ties on that day. I was headed to the Capitol after the show. And I will forever cherish that photo. And that time he came in and he told me he really enjoyed it afterwards. And I knew he'd do great, and he did, of course. 64 years old, Representative Price Wallace. May he rest in peace, man. So sad. Whew. We got we've got law professor Christopher Green coming on at 10:35 today. He's going to give us an update from his perspective on the Supreme Court. And then we've got Rankin Sherling, Associate Director of the Ole Miss Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom, joining middays at 12:05. We'll get an update from the Declaration of Independence Center at Ole Miss and get his thoughts on sort of the news of the day and how and what they're talking about, honestly, in their classroom at the Declaration Center. Studying American freedom. What do they think about current events, the current political landscape? So much going on there, and I'm so glad we have that program at the university so that students can avail themselves of much of this information and, more importantly, just really take note of how we got here. Sometimes we forget that and what our founders' vision was and what our framing documents are all about and how that's playing out today in law, in politics in general, in lawmaking. So that should be fun. Looking forward to that. On the C Spire text line, Ben from Madison says, prayers to Price's family and friends. Like you said, he was a good guy. He also had a great sense of humor. Terribly sad to hear this news. So true, Ben, and we need more of that, don't we, Rhino? We need people who don't take everything so seriously. That's not to say we don't have serious issues. But Price understood how to build coalitions around serious issues by injecting a little humor and just interpersonal friendliness. That's how you drive towards the common objectives, and he understood that. He knew how to do that, and he will be missed. That's the kind of people we want in public office. He represented his constituents with conviction, with honor, with dignity. So I appreciate that, Ben. Yeah, we're all kind of blown away about it. I know my friend Representative Fred Shanks. He and Price, of course, were big buddies and desk mates down there, and it was Representative Shanks who informed me of it, just to my shock yesterday, 3 o'clock time frame, and we're both just kind of shaken up about it, honestly. So, as are members of the legislature, of course, his friends, his family, and Speaker of the House Jason White posted a really nice tribute to him as well. And we appreciate the Speaker for highlighting Price's accomplishments, Representative Wallace's accomplishments, and his service in the Mississippi House of Representatives. Big time. We definitely appreciate that. Wow. So, lots of stuff going on. Lots of political news, financial news. Lots of woke, crazy stuff going on. Kind of saved that, but how about the weather? How about that, Rhino? El Nino, you've seen this. There's some concerns about this weather pattern and its impact on the overall planet, not just the United States, but the United Nations is urging the world to get ready for extreme heat risk from El Nino. And I guess I didn't know that was kind of a feature of El Nino weather patterns. I always thinking about the Gulf Stream and where it tends to hang out during the El Nino weather pattern. But they're saying that this could drive up global temperatures and increase the risk of extreme weather over the coming months. It's described as a periodic warming of sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean. That's where our fronts come from, of course, as they sweep from the west to the east across our country. Last between 9 and 12 months, according to the World Meteorological Organization. So there's some concerns there for sure. We're going to take a break right now from the Element Well studio. We're coming right back. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Welcome back, everyone. Derek and the Dominoes, Layla, one of the most recognizable guitar riffs of all time, I would say, Rhino. The great Eric Clapton on the lead guitar and the vocals, of course. So, you know, the Social Security program going broke in just 7 short years, a little under 7 now. Projections indicate that the program will be insolvent, and that simply means it doesn't have enough money coming in to pay the benefits going out. It's going to come up about 24% short in terms of revenue received relative to benefit obligations. So I started, again, looking into this a little further and was curious of how that would affect the state of Mississippi. And the effect is, as you can imagine, a little different per state. Just depends on kind of what the average benefits are in a state, how many people are receiving benefits. Turns out, this is a little shocking. 20% of our population would be affected. 20%. About 578,000 Mississippians. The average retiree's monthly reduction, $459. About 1.8% of the state's economy. That's and $3 billion of total benefits lost. A bit surprising, honestly, but that's kind of the sobering news with respect to the Social Security program and the trajectory that it is currently on. And that is certainly something to be concerned about. Again, I was a little surprised that it was that significant. The average monthly benefit cuts would surpass $500 in 29 states. More than 15% of the population would be directly impacted in 47 states. Mississippi being one of them, with the data showing that 19.6% of our population would be affected. So this will have an impact on GDP, which will have an impact on revenues at all levels of state and local governments because folks have less money to spend. That generates less sales taxes. Now, of course, this is all assuming that the Congress does nothing to resolve this situation, which I find highly unlikely. The question is, what can they do? And there's actually law that says you can't, it's kind of complicated, but you can't you can't pay out more than you're taking in plus your reserves, which is where we're headed, because the reserves will be depleted by then. And that's certainly a concern, but no state is spared from this pending problem, and you just don't hear a lot coming out of the United States Congress.
I fear at least part of the reason why nobody's talking about it, other than the fact that it's the political hot potato that nobody wants to be left holding.
Yeah.
They're just going to wait till the last possible minute and then print more money out of thin air to shore it up and drive the value of the dollar even lower.
I fear you're right. And one point, something I want to point out is they would have to change law to actually allow that. They couldn't just fire up the printing presses. And that, of course, you know how that works. The Treasury orders it. Actually, the Fed orders it from the Treasury. It's kind of crazy, the process. But some law would have to be amended. They can't just say, here's Social Security, have a bunch of money.
But they would rather do that than take the time and energy it would take to actually do something responsible with it. Completely
agree with you. No argument from me on that whatsoever. And that's likely the solution. So there'll be some legal process, lawmaking process, which will clear the way for what you're talking about, and then they're going to do that, and that, in fact, would be inflationary, as you indicate, and that's disturbing. But that's kind of the way the map shakes out with respect to Social Security's pending insolvency. We are among 9 states, whose GDP would be affected by more than 1%. That's significant. And then, of course, we're one of those states where more than 15% of the population is directly impacted. 47 states of the 50 are in that category. The average benefit cut in Mississippi, $459. 29 states would see a cut of $500 or more. It's a problem. And so just as we're dealing with this problem with our public employees retirement system in the state, which has a solvency problem, it's not as urgent. Social Security's is way more urgent. We're talking 7 years. And so how those projections are determined is you're looking at the people that are working, paying in. You're looking at the people that are scheduled to retire, and the system can determine, okay, actuarially, here are the people receiving benefits in the next 7 years. Here's how we project those passing away and no longer, of course, receiving benefits. We got new retirees coming into the workforce. They can pretty closely calculate what their benefits are going to look like. So essentially you're projecting future benefits and you're projecting future revenues based on all those data inputs. And then you've got, what we're seeing is, which is what's happened right now, has been happening for 3 years. There's not enough coming in from the workforce to fully cover the benefits. So they're having to dip into their savings account, and that's why it's going to be insolvent in 7 years. The savings account, based on projections, will be fully depleted. it will have zero in it. So right now that's being used to cover the shortfall, the delta between revenues coming in from the workforce, benefits going out to those retired. And right now that's not working out. We're having to dip into the savings account, but the savings account's going to run dry. That's in 2032. Just something that I wish the federal government would spend a little bit more time talking about, because I would venture to say that the vast majority of those on Social Security benefits don't know this is a possibility. Not really expecting that to be the case. They rely on their government to honor its obligation, is the truth, and they shouldn't have to worry about it.
And the two major political parties are just playing musical chairs with it, hoping that they're not the one without a chair when the music stops.
That's totally true. You're exactly right about that. And, of course, the only ideas that have been floated by the Democrats are raise taxes. And, by the way, not on the rank-and-file worker, but on the very small number of people whose income's over a certain level, their proposal is for them to just cover the whole deal. So you got a small number of households that are literally providing the funding for the giant 70 million people on Social Security. They're looking at a couple of thousand households, literally, footing that bill. There have been some proposals on the Republican side. I don't know if I'd say the Republican side as much as I would think tanks, more conservative think tanks. And those range from increasing the retirement age for people under a certain age to increasing the taxes on everybody, the payroll taxes you pay now, to allowing Social Security to invest in private securities. Right now they can't. They can only invest in one security, and that's a special type of government-issued bond from the Treasury. So that's pretty much what you've seen. And there have been some other sort of proposals to kind of do like what we were looking at here with Tier 5, which is in PERS, which is a hybrid sort of model. But, again, nothing definitive, nothing concrete. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
From the
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. We welcome now Christopher Green, Assistant Director, Chase Center for Civics, Culture, and Society at The Ohio State University. Professor, good to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see you.
Well, it seems like just since you and I have been talking on this show the last 4 or 5 years, I don't remember as much activity as at a high a profile that the Supreme Court has taken up since you and I started talking here. I mean, in the rest of my life prior to that, you just hardly ever heard anything coming out of the Supreme Court. Now it seems like it's every term.
They're doing stuff. They're taking fewer cases overall. They used to have like 150 cases a year or something. But so even pound for pound, they're taking away fewer cases. But the ones they're taking have got some big implications.
Yeah.
In general, I think you gotta say, well, a lot of it involves President Trump. He's been much more aggressive about his removal authority this term. So there's a case. So for years, every time we go over con law, talking about presidential power, say, well, since 1935, there's been these limits on presidential removal authority. And in 2017, I thought, well, we elected a guy whose catchphrase was "You're fired." Surely we're going to get a test of this sometime soon. Well, now it's finally happening. We're finally going to get a test of removal authority.
Okay.
And he's been very aggressive in different things. We had the big tariffs decision because he wanted to impose a bunch of tariffs under a statute that was not precisely tailored for that. He's got the birthright citizenship thing, which I think he's tweeted. He's Truth Social. I don't even know what the verb is for his
Truth
platform.
Social.
But
yeah.
He said he expects to lose and he expects to get mad about it.
Yeah.
So
right.
But yeah, and there's just other things with technology. They eventually come to the court, and just they are clearly not orchestrating their Junes to be exciting or unexciting, but this one looks like it's going to be pretty exciting.
Okay. So one was just released here not too long ago concerning some fines, right, against some telecom carriers. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's FCC fines that were levied against some of the big telecom carriers. And I guess they sued thinking those fines were wrongfully imposed, and the Supreme Court upheld the FCC's ability to do that, their imposition of those fines. You know anything about that?
Yeah, so one big issue with the case today, and there was a case a couple of years ago called Jarkissi that put some very serious Seventh Amendment limits. So you don't hear a lot about the Seventh Amendment, but the Seventh Amendment requires juries for civil cases. So you can't get money out of somebody without going to a jury. Well, what if you're an administrative agency? Well, we got our own kind of internal protocols about how to do this. We want to be able to get disgorgement. And if they call it disgorgement, does that mean it's not a fine? Justice Thomas, when he started in 1991, there were, after a couple of years, we're like, oh my goodness, we've got all these 8-1 decisions. Justice Thomas is all by himself. And he is, I think, the leading hawk on the Seventh Amendment. So he dissented, which is, it's not too surprising to see him say, like, yeah, this is an important structural device that is in the Constitution, basically requiring experts to prove to non-experts what's going on.
Okay.
So a jury is one way to do that. Just making a legislature be persuaded rather than just having executive agency just do it. That's another. There's probably 10, 15 different kinds of ways we do that, but a jury is one of them. And the founders thought juries were really, really, really important. A lot of experts now think, well, my goodness, bringing in 12 randos off the street it's much too complicated for them. It's probably too complicated for a judge. We really just should let the agencies do their thing. And Supreme Court has pushed back. I gather that there was some language, even while they said the FC could do this, there was some language that would have said, well, they could do this particular one, but there are a bunch of rules. And kind of reconfirming the Jarkissi idea that, generally speaking, you're not going to get money out of people without proving a jury of your peers, proving to a jury of your peers that it's acceptable.
Interesting. Well, what are some of the other high-profile cases coming before the court?
Yeah, so the big one that is going to kind of have a structural change is the presidential removal authority. So we have two cases. One of them is about removing the head of the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. And in 1935, there was a case about the FTC where the president said, you're maybe doing an okay job for someone with your policy position, but I just have different priorities. I want to remove you based on just disagreement with how we do things. And it looks like President Trump is going to win that one.
Okay.
Everybody is worried about the Federal Reserve. So can the president? So we've had a case where the president was allowed to remove somebody, and they had a little discussion saying, "Of course, we're not saying you can do that for the Fed." There's another case about the Fed, but the president is not saying he has the constitutional authority to remove Fed people. He's saying that a particular one, Cook, lied on her mortgage applications. And it's very complicated stuff with that. So there he's relying on a statute. The constitutional one, Trump versus Slaughter, is probably going to have some kind of explanation why Congress is allowed to have statutory insulation for the Fed. But the president, and then in a separate case, figuring out whether the president's allowed for this mortgage fraud stuff or the alleged mortgage misstatements to remove somebody. So it's going to be a more the president is going to have more authority over the executive branch, even though in certain respects the executive branch might be getting less power overall. So it's so you could have a unitary executive, but a smaller executive.
Okay.
Of course, this is always, one of the big things. It's not at the Supreme Court yet, but executive war powers. The House saying, hey, Congress is the one who's supposed to declare war. You really should go to Congress for a vote about whether we're gonna keep pushing on this Iran stuff. But just generally speaking, you're supposed to have legislation. Another big case, the immigration case, the TPS, temporary protected status, and this temporary protected status has lasted through longer than many presidential administrations. And it really, when you have a constitutional provision saying Congress has got to meet once a year, it really is wild how much delegation of the executive we got, and it's not healthy for the long-term survival of the republic, or at least just health of the republic, right? To be making so many decisions based on these one single elections. We should have rules that are stable, and if Congress wants to be nice to whatever country in Latin America or Syria, and just have a situation like that, we shouldn't be restrained by what some president said 4 or 5 terms ago. So it does look like, some of the indications, there's all these tea leaves about which justices have written from which months. And they, look at that like, oh, Chief Justice Roberts hasn't written these, or has written. So maybe he's going to be in dissent and something. So, but, we'll find all this stuff out, in a couple of weeks. So
interesting.
Or maybe 3 weeks, I guess. So it's, but it is catnip to, for a certain sort of, kind of gambling type of personality. There's not a whole lot of arbitrage opportunities to figure out what stocks to buy and then dump 3 weeks from now. But it doesn't stop us from speculating.
Yeah, and we have the Mississippi case, the suit against Secretary of State Michael Watson about when ballots can be considered.
Yeah, so the late voting situation is again. It looks like it's going to be. I mean, just there's nothing I think new about that other than so that was argued a little later. So they actually decided a case that was argued at the end of April. Today it was a pretty straightforward, unanimous case. They just wrote the opinion, no dissents, goes out and resolves it. But if it's late and it's going to have, some kind of interestingly controversial application, then certainly getting rid of late voting would be like a lot of people would be. It would be a significant change in how a lot of states have operated. They're going to take their time. So that's clearly end of June, just based on the calendar. Not really controversy, but it's probably going to have some controversy too.
We're seeing it in California right now. They had their election Tuesday. They hadn't gotten to 60% yet. But we appreciate you, as always.
Elections.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and all the redistricting stuff, it's going to be an interesting November, and this is an interesting June to proceed it with.
Appreciate it, Professor.
For a flipping good time, we interrupt this program. Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge news. Huge news.
Huge. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. The Dow comfortably in the green today, up 855 points, an all-time intraday high. That's because there is some talk of the conflict in Iran winding down. Every time we have that buzz, you watch the markets really take off. And then when there's a letdown, which we've experienced many times, when, well, not exactly ready yet, then the price of oil goes up and the markets go down. However, today, the good news is the price of oil down to $93, down almost $3 a barrel, and that is powering the Dow Jones and the S&P. The NASDAQ not faring as well. It's in the red, and that's because, man, Broadcom blew it out. A NASDAQ issue, technology company involved in many different endeavors. But the big one, of course, is the making of chips and powering artificial intelligence and quantum computing, and this massive data center build-out has significantly increased the demand for silicon for all sorts of chips, not just processors, but memory chips, specialized special-purpose chips called ASICs. And that's one category of special-purpose chips. ASICs, application-specific integrated circuit, I think is what the acronym stands for, if memory serves correctly. And that just means that you got a piece of silicon, literally, and systems, machines embed code. And those chips are tailored. They're optimized just to execute that code over and over and over again, whatever that particular function is in computer processing. ASICs. And you'll find those in hardware other than servers, say network infrastructure, as an example. And they'll have these processors that are installed on those devices that's tailored for whatever function that device executes in the ecosystem. But nonetheless, Broadcom, they make a bunch of that kind of stuff. They make a lot of stuff, as you know, for the telecom networking industry. That's the stuff that carries all of our voice and text traffic that's operated by the telecom carriers, the regional bells and others that are engaged in that business.
I'm trying to think of like a simple analogy for an ASIC, and the only thing I can come up with is like the pitching machine.
There you go.
Where you can set up a pitching machine to throw a baseball.
Yeah.
If you want to have a different pitching machine, like to throw a football or to throw a soccer ball, then you got to rebuild the pitching machine.
Right. But
it's still a pitching machine.
So the big difference, of course, you're right, is that instead of having software that's stored in secondary storage, if you will, and when you execute it, just think about you're sitting at your computer and you hit a button, you want to run a program, whatever it's doing, and that's fed into the processor, the central processor. It does its work and gives you your results. The difference is that the software itself, in this case, is actually stored, installed as part of the manufacturing process on the chip. So it's
if
not,
you want a chip to do something else, you have to redesign and remanufacture
that's
the chip.
correct. The ASIC only does that one thing, but it does it very well over and over and over. So it augments the central processor. So as the software comes through the central processor and it says, oh, you want to do this? I'm passing that over to the ASIC. And it says, I got that real quick.
Whereas if you try to put a football in a baseball pitching machine, it's going to have problems.
That's a good point. Yeah, great analogy. Love it. But nonetheless, Broadcom is what they do. And so they came out, they had a great quarter, top and bottom line, but the investment community punished them because they didn't offer quite as meteoric a future guidance. It's still strong, though. My gosh. But it wasn't enough, and so there's a bit of a sell-off on the NASDAQ. It's not a huge one, but, man, after the incredible run the NASDAQ's had to where it is. But the Dow, on the other hand, which has got sort of a different assortment of stocks and range of industries, it's knocking on the door of 1,000-point gain today. Got to like that for your 401k plan. We're going to take a break right here for Fox News and SuperTalk News, and I'm going to ask Rhino to remind me. He's got something to share with you about the World Cup, right, Rhino? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're coming right back. Stay with us.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth studio on this
Friday Eve.
All right, so Rhino, share with the folks the potential scenario for the matchups for the United States team in the World Cup.
Yeah, so for a little context, the U.S. is hosting the World Cup starting in like 7 days. We're co-hosting with Mexico and Canada, and it's the largest World Cup that's ever been held ever. The last time the U.S. hosted the World Cup was in 1994. I was a wee lad, and it was a wee tournament of 24 teams. That was the last World Cup that was held with 24 teams, but it's also the most well-attended World Cup ever. After that, the tournament expanded to 32 teams. This year is the first time it's going to be 48 teams in the World Cup. To put that in perspective, there are going to be more group stage matches at this World Cup than there were matches in the entirety of the tournament 4 years ago in Qatar. So, with that many teams playing that many matches, there's something like 500 different scenarios. And like I said earlier this week, I'm focusing much less on politics and much more on soccer because it's World Cup month. So I've been going through a lot of these different permutations, and there's only really one of them that's almost set in stone because of how many variables there are. It's not a scenario I would like because of what happens later on, but it is a possible scenario considering who we have in our group. We've got Turkey in our group. They're a tough opponent. We got Paraguay in our group. They're a tough opponent. And we got Australia. They're always scrappy. So, if the U.S. finishes the group in the World Cup second place behind, say, Turkey or Paraguay, they get hot, they score more points, they win the group, we come in second. We're matched up with Group G because we're playing in Group D. Group D is matched up with Group G, and we would play the second-place team from that group. Well, Group G has Belgium, a European powerhouse, Egypt, Iran, and New Zealand. Egypt and Iran are similar. Iran's probably a little better on paper. New Zealand, they're better at rugby. I mean, they're scrappy. They're kind of like Australia. So the likely scenario, if the U.S. finishes second in our group, is that Iran will finish second in Group G, and the first knockout round matchup for the U.S. in the 2026 World Cup that we're hosting on U.S. soil would be the U.S. versus Iran.
That's just incredible. I don't know. You could argue that may be the biggest sporting event in the history of the world right there. Seriously, given the circumstances, right? Just unbelievable. That I appreciate you going through all that research to figure out that possible scenario. That truly would be the shot heard round the world, metaphorically, of course. Wow. Incredible. The Mississippi Democratic Party is really pushing hard for Mississippi to raise its minimum wage. The Democrats across the country are, of course, they want to increase the federal minimum wage considerably. There's been lots of legislation to do that. Mississippi, of course, observes the federal minimum wage, which currently is $7.25 per hour. And they go through, the struggles and the challenges financially for those who are making $7.25 an hour in our state. I don't know that they've got any concrete, validated, vetted research that shows that there are a lot of single parents. That's one of the scenarios that they bring up with a child, a single parent with one child, that are making minimum wage. I'd be curious to know just how many people in our state fit into that category. They're an individual, they have a child, and they make the federal minimum wage. Because nationally, that's not the case. Nationally, the vast majority of those who make the minimum wage are single individuals between the age of 18 and 24. By the way, it's 1.8% of the workforce. It's a teeny tiny fraction of the workforce. It peaked in 1979 at like 13% of the workforce. So they are really pushing hard for this. They say raising the minimum wage isn't a threat to small business. Keeping workers too broke to spend is their point. Anytime there's pushback on how that would negatively affect those businesses who do have jobs where minimum wage is the pay. They say they will keep fighting for this policy, and I don't think they're going to go very far with it. Honestly, I do not support raising the minimum wage in the state of Mississippi. And they kind of end this long narrative here. So the next time someone tells you Mississippi can't raise the minimum wage, ask them why we keep trying and ask them who keeps saying no. So that would just accelerate the pace at which business figures out how to do many of those jobs, how to automate them. You saw the, $30 minimum wage in California for fast food workers they enacted. And across the state of California, you've got all these automated systems being deployed.
I mean, we haven't raised the minimum wage here in the Magnolia State, but you walk into a Mickey D's, you're using a kiosk to order more times than not.
That's absolutely true. Taco Bell, too. It's another one. So, and now they're talking about robots to do the cooking and all that sort of stuff. So what you're doing here with bad public policy is you're driving innovation, because they don't care about the economics here. They don't understand it, and they don't care about it. They just want to force it and then pat themselves on the back for it. And so they say at $7.25, working full-time, 40 hours a week, you bring home roughly $15,100 a year before taxes. And they cite something I've never heard of, the MIT Living Wage Calculator, which says that a single adult in Mississippi needs $19.44 an hour just to cover basic needs. No luxury, no savings, just rent, food, transportation, and utilities. Our minimum wage covers less than 40% of that. So I appreciate the point they're making, but the data shows that the vast majority of those earning the minimum wage in this country are not really primary breadwinners in a household. It's generally speaking, it's young people. I'm not saying there's none. There certainly are. But for the most part, It's young people that are just working themselves up the economic ladder. It's temporary work often, where they're trying to supplement their education or income as they try to figure out what what they want to do for more gainful, higher paying employment. I think they paint a picture that makes you feel like there's just this huge number in our population that are earning $7.25 an hour and can't make ends meet on that basis. But our median household income is the lowest in the country, but it's $55,000 an hour, and that's $27 roughly. $55,000 a year, pardon me, it's $27 an hour. So that's the median, meaning half below, half above. So I think they sort of took some liberty here in their reporting of trying to paint this picture that I believe projects it as much worse than it is. But what they don't get is the way to address this issue is to grow our economy, creating more of these high-paying jobs, but they want to implement policies that are a deterrent to that discourage that activity. They're not in favor of policies that would engender business expansion and investment and job creation, which is the way. So the solution to the minimum wage problem is to, again, get people in jobs that don't earn minimum wage. We got to create more of those. They just don't seem to want to implement the policies that promote such expansion, such job creation. Stepping aside for a break, we're coming right back with Rock the Casbah bumping us out of this segment. A great tune.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back with you in the Element Wealth studio. We thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, if you're just joining us in the first segment, we paid our respects to Representative Price Wallace from Simpson, Rankin County, lives in Mendenhall. He suddenly passed away yesterday. We're deeply saddened to hear that news. Price was just a good guy. And just want to make sure that if you're just tuning in, you are aware of that. Speaker of the House, Jason White, wrote a nice tribute to him. And I've talked to numerous members of the legislature, in particular in the House, that they're in a state of shock. He will be deeply missed, man. Just a good guy. I tell you, when I think about the great state of Mississippi and her fine people, he's a guy you'd put next to that description. He's one of them, and he will be missed. But heaven's game. He's making God laugh right now, guarantee you. Whew. On the C Spire text line, Ronnie in Summit points out, I worked the numbers years ago. If abortion were never legal, do you know how much more tax revenue would be generated by the people that never got to work? We wouldn't be begging for workers. There's a lot of truth to that, Ronnie, and you'd have to just include that also in something that is becoming a concern, and that's just fewer people, not only in our country, but in our world, of childbearing age do not intend to start a family. And that is a big concern. So demographers, actuaries can calculate what the replacement rate is. That's what it's called. And right now in this country, it sits at 1.6. That's the number of children per childbearing female that are needed to replace those who depart this earth. And it needs to be 2.1. 2.1. So we're behind by 0.5. Elon Musk says we're going to run out of people, literally. So this is a concern across the country. I know I shared the other day, you may not have heard us, that I think you verified this for me as well, Rhino, that there are more, I think it's Japan, more diapers being sold to seniors than to infants. It's either Japan or China, one of them. They both have a huge problem, as you know.
It's Japan.
Yeah, it's Japan. I thought so. Being overwhelmed by the senior population because so many of their young people just said, I'm not going to have any kids. And there's a myriad of reasons for that. But the reality is, as we get older, we do rely on the younger generation to take care of us. That's been the scenario for a very long time, but we're living longer, and that puts even more pressure on that situation. But I was shocked to read that information, that data, that, more diapers being bought by elderly people, by seniors, than for children. You don't think about that, but certainly as the body gets older, it's subject to that need, those conditions. But it's not a sizable chunk of folks over in the senior ages. But when when you got that many that turns out to be very statistically relevant. More than for infants. That's incredible. Because think about this. When you're in the infant age, when you need diapers, they all do. But when you're senior and you need it, it's a fraction. But that fraction is actually bigger, larger than all the infants. That's incredible to think about. So, but I hear you, Ronnie. There's some warnings being issued by people who are paying attention to this. Probably Elon Musk is the most high-profile one, where I've literally watched him present that information and discuss it, where he says, we're going to run out of people if we don't change and reverse this trend of low birth rate. No doubt about it. Just Ben from Madison, by the way, said prayers to Price's family and friends. I passed this on earlier, but it bears repeating. Like you said, he was a good guy. He also had a great sense of humor. My dad is 83, worked 48 years as a pharmacist, and receives about $4,100 a month. If he makes it to 90, does he lose his benefits? Not all of the benefits. So to be clear, what's occurring is that the trust fund, that's the savings account essentially, is being used every month to pay benefits because the amount of money coming in from workers and the interest earned on the investment Social Security makes is not sufficient to cover the amount of money going out. So it has to, just like your household, it has to dip into its savings to make ends meet. And eventually you run out of your savings. That's what's going to happen in 7 years if something's not done. And at that point, benefits will be reduced by about 24% if nothing's done. So not totally in that particular case to the person who sent us that question, but you can do the math there. That would in your dad's case from $4,100 to about $3,150 or so is what it would mean. So that would be a big hit that you certainly don't want him to take. Keith and Vaden, what about all the money I've been paying in since 1971? I hear you, Keith, but something that I think that gets overlooked and doesn't get the attention that it needs is when you're paying in, you're not paying for yourself. You're paying for everybody that's drawing out while you're paying in. It's a pay-as-you-go system. You're paying in for the privilege, actually the right, I would say, not the privilege. You're paying in for the right to withdraw. It's not that you're paying in to fund your retirement. You're paying in to earn the income that you will receive when you retire. It's the same as our public employees retirement system. All defined benefit programs are aligned with that structure. You pay in for that ultimate benefit you're going to get, not the money you're paying in being used to pay your benefits. Now, in a defined contribution plan like your 401k plan, that's exactly how it works. Whatever you pay in is what's available for you to take out. But in our PERS and Social Security defined benefit programs, you're just paying in for that right to receive money out when you get to that point. You work so many years, you pay in, whatever that is, that's used to calculate the amount you get out. You get it out until you die. In your 401k plans, you get it out when the money runs dry, when you've withdrawn it all. Congress do nothing, safe assumption on the ceasefire text line. Michael in Brookhaven, speaking of how things work in government, can you explain the process of counties in Oregon leaving for Idaho? That's an interesting question and very timely. I literally just had a brief meeting this past Tuesday with an individual from Idaho that came to Mississippi, has an interest in working with our agricultural community. Rhino has some really cool regenerative agricultural products. And honestly, I was impressed with the amount of information that he knew about agriculture in the state of Mississippi, particularly with respect to crop protection products, because that's his business, that's his industry. This guy's brilliant and never went to college, which does not a measure of your brilliance, as we've said many times. He just knows his stuff. And I was very impressed. But I asked him that very question. Now, if you're familiar with Oregon and Washington, I am, because I lived in Portland, Oregon for about a year, long time ago, 40-something years ago, on a job. I don't know if I ever shared. You know what that project was, Rhino? The Public Employees Retirement System of Oregon. Because the one we did in Louisiana, the first one in the country, other states said, wait, you guys know how to do this. Come up here and do it here. Because before that, it was all manual, literally, except the check production. And they would outsource that usually to a bank, to what's called a service bureau. It's kind of the early sort of cloud services, if you will. And you just sent them a file, said, here, pay them all this. And the checks just came out. It wasn't an integrated, automated system. That's what we did. But I asked him about that. Well, when I lived in Oregon, the one thing I noticed is that on the western side of the Cascade Mountain Range, which splits the state to the coastal region and sort of the higher plains region is what it is, on the east of the Cascade, night and day culture. That eastern side, like us, conservative people, a lot of just good, rural, God-fearing people. The coast, that's where all the nutcases are, like they are today. They were 40 years ago. They were nutcases on the coast. That's where Portland is. And so the folks on the east want to get the hell out and go to Idaho because it's more like us. Coming right back.
From this
Properly set all controls before recording.
All systems go.
the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. So answer that question for our listener that sent us the question about the possibility of the eastern portion of Oregon becoming part of the state of Idaho.
Yeah, they've got a pretty uphill battle to get anything done. They've started the ball rolling because the first steps are you have local ballot measures to show that the communities are behind the idea, and that's become the Greater Idaho Collective or Coalition or whatever they're calling themselves. That's been done. The next step would be to form an interstate compact between Idaho and Oregon, which would mean both the states of Idaho and Oregon would have to pass legislation in their respective states agreeing to the terms of the redrawing of the border. That would then have to be signed into law by each state's governor, and then they would have to petition both houses of Congress to redraw the border. It just doesn't look like it's going to happen. The best bet for anything moving forward, oddly enough, is whether or not Alberta can get away from Canada. Because then if that becomes a conversation about adding Alberta as a state or territory, then you have more Congress people willing to have the conversation. Even then, it's still an uphill battle because one of the parties, Oregon, isn't likely to be okay with giving up about a half of their landmass and population.
Right. So lots of hoops to jump through to make it happen, and that's
why it's only ever happened once with West Virginia breaking off from Virginia.
Yeah, totally. But as you know, that the state, it truly is bifurcated. I mean, the cultures in those states. You look at a state like Mississippi, sure, there are cultural differences between the various regions of our state. That's just because of how states got settled. But I don't know, maybe not as stark a contrast as it is in a state like Oregon, where it really is just polar between the eastern and the western region of the state, divided by the Cascade Mountains there. That just split it vertically. Very interesting. So on the C Spire text line, Joey the trucker says, well, when the one passed away, I guess you're talking about Social Security, right, Joey? When are they going to start taking them off the books? Gerard ain't going to do that. I don't have any control over that, Joey. It's like y'all said, they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Well, yeah, the reforms that are necessary. And so, and you're right, that the issue of having dead people receiving benefits is certainly one we should not dismiss. But there's, like everything, there's a little nuance involved here. When the Doge folks got in and reviewed the database, they did find a lot of people based on their birth date that were likely no longer living. But, and this is crazy, and I remember this back in my COBOL development days, a lot of it was a software issue. Older records that relied on the old legacy COBOL language for Social Security, which was the very first Social Security system that it was automated using COBOL, assigned a default year. 1875 was one. And so a lot of people show up as very old that aren't. But the other thing that was because that was just a bogus filler, if you will, is that it turns out there are very few dead people that were discovered at the end of the day receiving benefits. I mean, it's immaterial. It was way less than originally thought based on the number that no way they could be alive. A person born in 1875 wouldn't be alive today. Turns out they're also not receiving benefits. So the claim was there are 20 million dead people receiving $100 billion. Initially, that's the story that was repeated over and over again based on Doge's findings. But all that, as you know, is settled down when they did further review and investigation, and checks going out to people that would have fit into that category was little to none. So the total number of payments, if it were 21 million dead people, by the way, the amount of payments would exceed the population 65 and older. You got to do a little math there, but that's so if you say, okay, wait, 73 million people are getting benefits, and if 21 were old or old dead people. And by the way, those 21 are in the database, not just among the 73 million, is the point being made here. But the database has everybody, all history of everybody that's ever flowed through Social Security. So, unfortunately, that's not a solution. That's the main point. I'm all for it. It's stupid to me that we even have this problem. And it's not, as you know, Rhino, it's not just Social Security. It's throughout government at all levels, like our voter rolls. Like, why do we have people who shows as being 130 years old on our voter rolls? And there's all kinds of reasons for that you'll hear cited. That doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's voting that's listed in there. That there's a distinction. It's the same thing here. Just because they're in the database, that doesn't mean they're getting benefits. And that ultimately is what was discovered. It turned out to be just a fraction. That didn't amount to a lot. But it is crazy that someone who was born in a certain year that would make them 150 years old is still in these databases. I don't think we have anybody that's that old. It's pretty simple to clean that up. We do have death records now, all automated, that are accessible, and all these systems should be required to do that, to clean the databases up. So we don't have this possibility whatsoever. We just eliminate that risk. Can Social Security money be invested in stocks, bonds, real estate? Could we not move towards a more individualized plan? Well, this first question is, that's been talked about a lot, and that's one of the proposals that's been advanced, and that is taking the shackles off of Social Security and allowing the program to invest in more than just a single asset it's allowed to invest in today, which are some special Treasury bonds. And I looked it up a couple of weeks ago. The average interest rate on those bonds is 3.5%. So it's not really paying what would be considered a market return given today's dynamics. It's been talked about. The Democrats go crazy because, oh my gosh, you're privatizing Social Security. No, we're not. We're trying to allow Social Security to make investments in other assets that generate a much greater return than these no-risk Treasury bonds. I acknowledge there's no risk. The Treasury's not going to default on paying the interest and redeeming the principal. You just don't get a lot in return. Contrast that to our public employees retirement system, which is allowed to invest in private securities. In fact, if it didn't, it couldn't function. It wouldn't have enough money to pay benefits. So I'm all for that. Move towards a more individualized plan where you would select investments, if that's what you're talking about, not in a defined benefit plan, because remember, again, you're not investing for yourself. You're just paying in for that right eventually to draw out. If you wanted to move it to a more traditional 401k style model, we certainly could do that, but that means you don't get benefits for life. Your benefits cease when your money runs out. And then you'd have to have some way to fund everybody that's in the program or is vested or about to start drawing benefits. Still got a big problem there you'd have to come up with, because at that point, the money you're paying in is not going to pay benefits. It's going to your future retirement. Ronnie from Ackerman, wouldn't it be a plus for Social Security if they would eliminate the penalty for making over a certain amount once you start drawing benefits? Seems like there might be more people that would continue working a full-time job and therefore would also be continuing to contribute to Social Security. So, yeah, that's a little nuanced, because that's not exactly how it works where you make over a certain amount. That's if you haven't reached retirement age, if you early retire. Once you hit full retirement age, 65, or it depends on when you were born, actually. I think mine is 67 and 8 months, or 66 and 8 months. Yeah, that changes at that point. It doesn't matter how much you earn outside of Social Security. You're good to go. It's before then, if you retire earlier, which means a reduced benefit. Let's see here. We are going to take a break. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Rally up a Miss.
Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back in the Element Wealth studio. So I think most of us have seen a lot of content, probably all of us, honestly, that has been generated by AI. And not talking so much about the graphical content, but text content. And it's very helpful, very powerful in doing that. And I'll admit that sometimes I might use it to just kind of give it a little start. But then I generally say, okay, that's all I need to know. And then I go write it on my own because I want it to sound like me. And it doesn't create text content that sounds like the author. And you can tell, like, that's not how they talk. But there's a fantastic article in Medium. Medium is a media source, pretty much focuses on all things AI and technology. And they have an article about how you can detect if something's AI generated. And one of the things I noticed that seems to be common that I just didn't start noticing until this explosion of AI-generated content started to just become pervasive. And there's some things you can look at and tell, yeah, that's definitely AI. And one of those things is just trying to over-dramatize even simple things. And here's an example that they use. Here's a statement. It's important to note that AI has changed how we consume, create, and interact with stories. This is not just a technological shift. It's a cultural reckoning. So you see the over-dramatization. But the key there is when you see these statements that say, this is not, or this is more than, that's a key. Nobody talks that way, naturally. And here's another one. They call these other honorable mentions. He didn't just close the door, he ended a chapter. You know, so it's just like, oh my gosh, over drama. She didn't just leave the room, she left behind a version of herself she would never get back. Just to describe somebody leaving the room, right? Oh, man. It's not just a chore. It's slavery dressed as an obligation. So it attempts to give way more weight to a sentence.
Because it's convinced that the longer a sentence, the better a sentence.
That's exactly right.
Which was in response to one of the early AI ways of figuring out whether or not it was, or one of the ways you could figure out whether or not AI had written or not, was the use of short, choppy sentences.
Yeah.
Another way you can find it is
That's true.
I think they call it the lack of hesitation.
Okay.
Which I just did it right there in saying it, where I said, I think.
Yeah.
Or if you say seemingly, or perhaps, or maybe, or it's not leaving any room for error. It's just stating what it's decided.
That's true. And you know, there are, I'm not sure who would be the category of people that advise like how to communicate, but call them communications experts. And they recommend never saying, I think, rather, I believe. Yeah. You've seen that, right? I'm not out of line here. Am I right on that? Yeah. I think sort of leaves it to kind of open, but I believe is more of a conviction. Now, here's my favorite. He didn't just sit on the toilet to poop. He surrendered to the weight of his existence and taught the toilet a valuable lesson. That's awesome. Oh, man. Whew.
What people really want from AI is the ability to just tell a computer to do what I want it to do.
Exactly.
Like, don't send me any more push notifications from this app unless.
Here, Gerard, that's not AI. It's more like a typical liberal Democrat somebody sent on the ceasefire text line. Also a question from Ann from Oxford, or statement. What about all the IOUs to Social Security from Congress? If those were paid back, would that make it solvent? I'm saying yes. Or could Trump put the tariff money into Social Security to make more solvent? The answer to those both is no, Ann, and we're kind of running out of time, but I will explain that later. And I have before, and I apologize to those. It's not as it seems, and I know that's a popular narrative, but it's categorically false. The Social Security Administration, by law, must loan its surplus revenue on an annual basis to the U.S. Treasury, who then pays interest on that. It is the only income generation mechanism it has. Every dime has been paid back, except $2.7 trillion. Coming right back after Fox News SuperTalk News.
Your home. Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Friday Eve.
We're pleased to welcome now Rankin Sherling, Associate Director of the Ole Miss Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom. How about it, Rankin? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So give us an update on the latest from the Declaration of Independence Center at Ole Miss.
Well, things are going really well here. We're very excited about several things. We've got 113 students registered for our classes in the fall, which is that's a lot for this early for us anyway. So we're looking at potentially well over 200, possibly 250 students in the fall. That's a real milestone for us because 2 years ago, we started teaching class. We had 25 total students. So that's a big uptick. We also just published the first edition of our new magazine called The Declaration, and it's in print now. I know we gave you a copy at the end of April.
Awesome. Yeah.
And it really, I wasn't in charge of it. One of our staff members, Scott Morris, did that along with student help. It really is extraordinary. The writing is great. It's beautiful. It'll be available online by the end of June. So we'll try to put one more edition out here in our first year. So that'll come out by the end of the year. And then maybe next year we'll put out 3. But it's really unique. That declaration is really unique. The guy who's running that is a guy named Scott Morris. He's studied political philosophy under 2 of the greatest anti-communist thinkers really ever. Leszek Kolakowski and Francois Furet, both former communists. One of them, Kolakowski, had to flee Poland for his life. And both of them really wrote these amazing books that just, for a long time, completely undercut the idea of Marxism, period. I mean, they destroyed the academic credibility of Marxism for a long time. Now, that's, of course, come back.
Yeah.
But what makes Scott unique is that he did that. He went to Ole Miss, and then he studied under one guy at the University of Oxford in England and then 2 guys at the University of Chicago. But he left that and became a writer and became he's helped start the Oxford American, which some people will remember. That started in the 1990s, and that became a real great magazine. So he's got a lot of skills that a lot of academics don't have, and he's helping teach our students these skills, like how to leave here and be ready to go ahead and step onto a magazine staff and punch above their weight. And the student editor of the magazine this year is on his way to Stanford Law. So we're real excited about the possibilities of the Declaration, not just because it will help harness the way and direct all these swirl of conservative ideas, especially coming up into the post-Trump era. So who's going to direct all these ideas once Trump's gone? You don't know. I mean, it's just kind of a swirl of, ideas that are against the leftist ideas, but do they really have a rudder that keeps them together, like back in the old days, like William F. Buckley kept the conservatives intellectually somewhat together? So maybe this could be that. So that's exciting, but also just the opportunities it gives our students. We're real excited about that. And then the last thing is that we've hired Gad Saad, who, if you didn't know who Gad Saad was before this summer, you almost certainly know who he is now, because his new book, Suicidal Empathy, is like the number one nonfiction book in the world right now. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly the truth, but it's basically the truth. And he'll be moving down here this summer. And I really, honestly, for the first time in a long time, maybe since John Grisham was here in Oxford now has a guy who's shaping the world of thought somehow. You may not agree with Gad Saad, but you will have to contend with his ideas and his evidence. And I think that's really exciting. Not just that he's in Mississippi or Ole Miss, but he's with us. He's at the Declaration of Independence Center.
It's awesome.
So,
yeah, we are blessed. Yeah. Got to meet him and his wife not too long ago, and had met him, I guess, a year ago when Dr. Scoltetti was recruiting him and trying to bring him in. And we had a little dinner with some people that were helping with that effort. And I got to tell you, at that point, I wasn't confident he was coming. And there was a breakthrough, and he did, and we are so blessed to have him. He's brilliant. His wisdom, his insight, and his ability to size things up and consume information, especially about just people and human nature, and life and liberty, and then analyze that and discuss that in a way that everybody can understand. He's outstanding at that. So we're blessed, man. That's just good stuff.
We are. And I'll tell a quick story. I don't know. I won't tell all the details because I don't know if I have permission to do that. But he was being recruited by lots of other people, right. Not just Ole Miss, not just the Declaration of Independence. And some of those places could offer him quite a bit more money than we could, and they did. Yeah. And he still decided to come here. And I asked him about that, and he said, well, there's a couple of things. But one of them was, he's born in Lebanon. Yeah. And had to flee Lebanon, I think, at 12 years of age because of the civil war that was going on there. But he grew up in a Lebanese community. His family most of them moved to Montreal in Canada. And they have a very strong hospitality and honor culture there in Lebanon. And when he said he came to Mississippi, he said, this is the closest thing to that culture that I've ever felt. And not that this comes from the Lebanese, but we also have a big powerful Lebanese community here culturally, especially I'm from the Delta. Yeah. And, we grew up thinking kibbe was just a Southern food.
Right. Exactly.
That's a Lebanese food.
Very familiar. Yeah. So I'm not sure if you're aware, my original business partner, Lebanese, comes from a prominent Lebanese family. And he actually did some research into his genealogy. It turns out that his ancestors were the original inhabitants of the city of Jackson, Mississippi. Wow. Yeah, and by the way, his family originally from Greenwood. And by the way, shout out to him. He told me yesterday his mother, whom I believe was in her 90s, passed away yesterday, but from Greenwood. And my dad knew a lot of them because a lot of them are in the dry goods business. And my dad was in the dry goods business. And so there's a vibrant, as you point out, Lebanese community within our state, and a lot of them did settle in the Delta originally. I always wondered if that was an attraction to Gad when he came here.
It was.
Isn't that awesome?
It was. Yeah, it is so awesome. I think it's less that there's a Lebanese community here. I know he's thrilled by that. I mean, when I met you for the first time down in Jackson with Gad a few years ago, I guess that was a little more than a year ago. There was a lady there from Vicksburg. I can't remember her name, but she was speaking Arabic she's born and raised in Vicksburg.
Yeah.
She was speaking Arabic with Gad in Jackson. I was just like, wow, this is crazy. Mississippi is an incredible state.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's a big Lebanese community in Vicksburg. My dad had a customer, Carl Jabor, had a clothing store down there on the street. Close to the river downtown. So, That's awesome. Well, he's fantastic. And the other thing I want to ask you about, we may get cut off by time. We can continue it in another segment, was what sort of conversations are you guys having with the students in the classroom these days with the political landscape, the war in Iran, and so forth? What's that looking like?
We just got our student evaluations back, and they were really good. One of them, if I can just plug ourselves just a little bit more, is one of them was very short and to the point. It said, "This is the most important class I've ever taken."
That's awesome,
and I've recommended it to all my friends. And what they like about it, I mean, almost all of them said, "We like that it's completely free to talk about whatever we want to talk about. We can ask a question about whatever we want to talk about." And it's open like that. And it makes me wonder what their other classes are like, frankly. But I'm glad that we're doing that. Now, one of the things that I'm hearing is a lot of our young men are extremely angry. They're like sort of rebellious by nature at that age anyway, but they're ready to go. So you've got this group of people who normally at Ole Miss are not really that interested in academics, are doing everything they can to read as much as they can about the founding documents, and it's a really cool thing to see.
Wow. Well, if you can hang with us, we can continue the conversation. I'd be curious to know about the discussions in the classroom about the war in Iran, and young people seem to have a little bit perspective on that. So we've got Rankin Sherling, Associate Director of the UM Declaration of Independence Center. We're coming right back.
I'm here. It's on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The great Tom Petty bumping us into this segment. We're visiting with Rankin Sherling, Associate Director of the UM Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom. So, yeah, just curious, Rankin, what's the attitude of the 20-somethings, the 19-year-olds about this war in Iran, which has honestly been kind of the top issue in our political world for the last 3 months now? What do they think about all that?
Well, the questions that I mostly got were questions like this. Do we control our own country? Are we being pushed by Israel into a war that could obviously be very devastating if China or Russia got involved? That was their first, that's really kind of the talking point that they really wanted to talk about at first. And they had never heard any real, even semi-intelligent pushback against those ideas. They would quote things from that they heard from Nick Fuentes or Tucker Carlson. like, so I think the most common thing I heard was that a majority of the Congress is either Jewish ethnically or they've taken money from the Jewish lobby. And if you look into that just a little bit more closely, what you realize, well, that may be on the surface true, but a lot of ethnic Jews vote against Israel.
Yeah.
And two, somebody who serves a senatorial career of like 30 years or something like that, if they accept $50,000, that sounds like a lot, but divide that by 30 years, that's not enough to sway a politician one way or the other, especially go to war. So the young men in particular are listening to people are really angry about that, and they're fired up, but they really love just sitting and chatting about it and not being judged by it. And like, let's look at some data here. I'm a historian, so that actually really helps. I was trained by a really world-class historian who's an old-school historian. You have to learn what you can say from the data. So that's what I try to teach our students. Like, let's dial everything back here and see what exactly the data forces us to say, and cut everything else out. And once they do that, they're not only learning a great technique, but they're kind of chilling themselves out a little bit too. Like, there's a lot that we don't know about this war, frankly, and they're right to be concerned, but it's certainly not a case, in my opinion, it's certainly not based on the data that we're not controlling, as in the United States is not controlling ourselves and Israel's controlling us. That's not the case. I don't see anything that demonstrates that case. And especially I'm kind of bolstered in that point by this loose report that it may or may not be substantiated that Trump really gave it to Netanyahu a couple of days ago. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, do. Yeah. So you're skeptical as to whether or not that happened as reported?
No, I think it probably did. I just think, we don't really have any hard data for sure that happened. But there's a lot of smoke, and where there's a lot of smoke, often there's a fire.
Probably something. I mean, I get the sense that the president is just frustrated with the whole ordeal, that Iran didn't immediately capitulate and concede and just heed to the request and to the insistence by the president in this country that you just discontinue your nuclear ambitions and hand everything over. And that hasn't been the case. And I think he's frustrated with that. And he sees how that's affecting the economy and having all kinds of other consequences play out as a result, and just ready to get something done. So it's being reported right now that he says by the weekend. Now, so he's reporting optimistically that it looks like there's a breakthrough, but we've seen that before. I think we have to be honest, and we haven't seen a concrete resolution. And maybe that will be the case here. But, that makes sense. I can see where young people would question that, and you're aware that kind of what's going on there is a lot of people in this country contend that Netanyahu is controlling Trump, and that it's Netanyahu that drugged the United States into this conflict with Iran, and the president says that's not the case. But that seems to be a very popular view.
Yeah. There's that. That's one of the things that I've heard a lot about in the class this past semester and past year. The other thing that's kind of surprising is that a lot of these big fraternity guys, who I really have a soft spot for these guys, and they're becoming more intellectual than they maybe would have otherwise been at this age, but just because of circumstances, really.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are becoming very interested in the Bible and Christianity. There's this one guy from Texas in particular. It's just a hilarious guy, big dude. I mean, just the person that you would expect to be from Texas to roll in here to Ole Miss and become a popular fraternity guy, a big hunter and fisherman, and clearly a former athlete. Anyway, he came up to me and he was like, he wanted to tell me this story about he went to the bookstore and he asked for a Bible. He'd never read the Bible before, really any of the Bible, and he went to this bookstore and he said, I'd like to buy a Bible. And he said they had to go look for one. You know, they found one and he bought it and whatever. And I said, well, which bookstore did you go to? And he's like, well, I went to the university bookstore. I said, well, I mean, there's two ways to look at this. I'm surprised they had one.
Yeah.
You know,
period.
You know,
right.
They had one. Yeah. And then he told me he went straight home and read the entire book of Revelation. And I was
wow.
I was like, that might not be the best place to start there. You know, maybe Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John.
Yeah, it could be a little ominous, perhaps. So
yeah.
Interesting.
There's a real shift going on. There's like a kind of a real shift going on, and it's been interesting to see, and a lot of it's been really good. A lot of it's really satisfying to see.
Yeah, and that you're right. And there, as you know, reports of that occurring across the country, in particular with young people that are flocking to the church. They're looking for a place to be inspired and hear the word and be part of a faith community. Well, that's a good thing because it's dropped off quite a bit, as you know, for several decades. It's been on the decline, but looks like it's on the upswing again. That's all positive. I think, to a great extent, Rankin, that maybe Charlie Kirk is a big factor in that. As you know, he talked about that a lot, identified with the young people, was all over the college campuses. What do you think?
I totally agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I think Charlie Kirk is related to both of the aspects of sort of this moving towards an anti-Israel stance, or at least questioning very strongly and maybe frustratedly this Israel connection.
Yeah.
And the move towards Christianity. I think Charlie was able to harness that energy, particularly a young male energy, but also young females, but mostly these young males. He was able to channel that in a way that kept everything moving in a sane direction. And now you've got this whole group is now listening to different people. There's no more Charlie Kirk, although he's got thousands of videos and stuff, so he's still very influential. But, you know, you've got people listening to Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and lots of other people who I think are very sane about some things, but I find slightly insane or very insane in some other things. And not that I'm the end all be all, but you've got people especially young people, taking some of these talking points which are dressed up in a really wonderful narrative, and they're taking it hook, line, and sinker. So Charlie's involved with both of those because I think if he was around, he would push back really intelligently with a great narrative and with that connection that he had with young people to steer them away from sort of the more hostile anti-Israeli or Jewish ways of thinking.
Yeah. I think it's great. You told us in the last segment how the feedback you get from the students is that I feel like I can express my views here without any sort of retaliation or repercussions. And I think that's absolutely fantastic, and that's what the college experience should be all about. It was always billed as the laboratory of ideas, right, and free expression, and you make your own mind up. But, you know, that's been suppressed a lot on college campuses, or there have been sort of penalties for it if your opinions didn't agree with the people in front of the classroom there. But so that's all good stuff. Yeah. We need to get that injected throughout the university environment. I think you would agree with that. So, but you guys you're at the core of that, and we appreciate it. Rankin, appreciate you coming on. Always enjoyed the conversation. Good job. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. So, Rhino, earlier in the program, he outlined all the various prerequisites, I guess, in the World Cup, the way the matches would have to turn out based on all the matchups and the brackets and so forth. It could actually create a game, result in a game that would feature the United States and Iran. And somebody said, Rhino lost me, trying to explain all the bracketology there. Dan in Hattiesburg says, if we did play Iran and we won, they would probably kill the Iranian coach. Yeah, quite possible. Good point.
I mean, we did beat them 1-0, 1-0 in the group stage of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar.
Yeah, true. David Monticello says, with the amount of inflation that we have had over the last 20 years, I do believe minimum wage should be raised to $10, but over a gradual period of time. And I think the minimum wage ought to be zero. I think the market ought to determine that. And again, just want to point out, Dave, that it's a tiny fraction of the population, of the working population. It's 1.8%. And the vast majority, and this is, by the way, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is not just like third hand. Are those between 18 and 24. They're not breadwinners running a household. This truly is kind of an interim-type job, stepping up the employment ladder there. Jerry in Waynesboro says, all the school administrators are concerned with is to make sure the students attend school. That was the other day. If they are out 3 days, they get a threatening letter that they can be jailed if they don't send their child to school. They just need the head count for the money. There is some question about the way we fund schools based on enrollment versus based on attendance. That's been a controversial topic. He also pointed out, does Jerry, that's better than the bus drivers' pay. I'm not sure exactly what pay he was comparing to, but bus drivers certainly earn more than minimum wage. If you are an adult whose primary job is earning minimum wage, then you've obviously made some poor life choices earlier in your life, says Louis from the 662. I would tend to agree with you, Louis, but I would also add to this. You likely were raised in an unstable household. That's by far the biggest contributor. You just didn't have stability in your place of residence. And that could mean a lot of different things, but it wasn't a nurturing, loving environment conducive to learning and development and thriving, because that will carry you through your adult years. Minimum wage was meant for people like my dad, who said you need to get up off your ass and go find a job this summer when I was in high school. That was Darren in Jackson. Scott in Clinton says Elon Musk is doing his best to repopulate the country. How many kids does he have? Like 14 or something like that, Rhino, from several different mothers, I believe, right?
Yeah, he's got 4 different mothers of his children. Remember Grimes, and you had the Ashley St. Clair lady that was bad-mouthing him and trying to get a settlement out of him. You had, what was the lady's name? It was an odd name, Siobhan something. I think it was Siobhan.
She's been vocal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you had, was it Justine?
Okay.
He can't keep up with all of them. But yeah, it's like 4 or 5 women, and he's got 14, 15 kids.
On the C Spire text line, do away with all individual taxes. Charge a 15% sales tax on every item purchased. That way, we're paying taxes on the money we spend, not the money we make. I would be in favor of not taxing essentials such as medicines, medical care, and food. I'm sorry to report that while I like it, I'm for moving to a consumption tax. That would actually dramatically increase deficits, the model you proposed. If you didn't tax medical care, you don't pay taxes on now. Some medicine you do. It depends on the state. Talking about at a state sales tax perspective, but if you were to implement a federal sales tax, in that way, and you taxed every item purchased, you would also have to tax services because we purchase as much in the way of services when you consider business to business, right? Because they pay sales taxes. And in some states, we're talking about state sales taxes. In Mississippi, it's actually fairly complicated what services are subject to sales taxes and what aren't. But at the federal level, you'd have to incorporate all services. You would still, you would increase the deficit doing the quick math from $2 trillion to about $3.5 trillion if you did that. And that's with everybody paying no.
And then you have to look at the likely economic downturn because if you had a consumption tax that would be considered onerous on large purchases, you'd have even less people buying housing. You'd have even less people buying cars, and it would just kind of spiral at that point.
And by the way, you'd have to tax houses to include in that. So if you didn't do that, that would make the deficits even worse. So, look, it sounds good on paper, and I'm for it, and the fair tax is probably the most structured proposal that's been considered, and it's been around a long time. Doesn't get any traction, and it's got included in it what's called a prebate, which means that a lot of people wouldn't pay any taxes because they depended on their income, the government, and that would just be screwed up. You know it would. That's my concern. We're going to send them money to cover the sales taxes you're paying at the cash register based on the estimates, based on your income. I don't see anything good coming out of that. The concept is solid, but it's not quite what people think, and it would still create a huge deficit. More children are born to low-income families. I'd venture to say a lot of them are on government assistance. You're right about that, and it depends on the state, of course. In the state of Mississippi, 3 numbers I'll share with you that I think are very telling and drive virtually all of our challenges in the state of Mississippi. That's 46, 56, and 57. 46% of our children live in fatherless homes. 56% of our children are born out of wedlock. 57% are born under the Medicaid program, which means that they're born to a low-income parent or parents. They live in a low-income household, being born into that. And that's, it's not a condemnation of them. It's just statistically speaking, the odds are against them in being a successful contributing adult. We have too many people getting a disability check for a headache and their kids get a check also. I think that's true that there's a lot of scamming of disability benefits in the case in the state and the country. And Rhino, you're shaking your head. I agree. We're way too liberal with that. And that's not breaking Social Security, but it is a component of it for sure. It was never meant to be a program that provides income for disability. It was meant to be insurance against poverty in the unlikely event you live to be 65. Literally, when the program was created, that was the premise of it. It was an anti-poverty program. Can't work anymore. And you got to remember, in that era, most people did physical labor. Yeah, they got to 65. They pretty much couldn't work anymore, couldn't do the jobs that were available. Not as much today because of our services economy. But that's what the original idea behind the program was. Jeff in Carrollton says, I know some people in Idaho through business, and they are definitely different, but still common sense conservatives. Agree with you. We're talking about this proposal for the eastern part of Oregon to become part of neighboring to its east, Idaho, because they're more aligned culturally and philosophically. But you explained to us earlier, lots of hoops to jump through to make that happen. Ronnie from Ackerman says, I understand what you said. I was talking about Social Security and how the benefits are reduced when you retire potentially before you get to full retirement age and you're still working. But once you hit full retirement age, you get full benefits. And he says, I understand what you said, but even after your full retirement age, aren't 85% of your benefits taxed if you make over a certain amount? Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, so under $25,000 as an individual, Social Security income's taxed differently than regular income, what's called ordinary income. Under $25,000 as an individual, no tax benefits. It turns out, no tax on benefits. It turns out, latest data from Social Security, the average benefit's about $2,600. So the vast majority of people, actually after the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, Ronnie, went into effect, 80% of those receiving Social Security benefits do not pay income taxes at the federal level on their benefits. Of course, you know, all retirement income in the state of Mississippi is exempt from income tax. Just imagine if the Social Security Administration were allowed to invest in total market index funds. Totally agree and have been a proponent of that for a long time. The fact that they are limited to only investing in one security, and that's Treasury, special Treasury bills that pays very low interest, is a problem. And if they allowed them to do that a long time ago, to invest more diversely, we wouldn't have this problem. Final segment next.
Hey, folks, I'm Andy Gilling.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Against the grain on the C Spire text line, 1986, I got $2.25 an hour on the farm, ate a Big Mac meal, supersized, for $3. No, I hear you. I suspect, Rhino, there's a bunch of people tuned in that at some point in their life earned the minimum wage. I did. I started working in the 8th grade at the Cotton Bowl bowling alley over on Lynch Street, about a mile from Jackson State. I was had a big interest in bowling and bowled competitively as a junior, and got asked one day to come work the counter, and they taught me how to do that. Then they taught me how to work on the machines in the back. Yeah, minimum wage. And I did that through high school. I went over to Laurel Lanes, which is behind the Piccadilly on 55. That building is no longer in operation as a bowling facility. But then when I was in college, I worked in the summers as a janitor, cleaning up the place by myself for a minimum wage. I get it. It's just earn some money to pay for tuition and help out with college, and then get out and go do something productive. I still think there's a lot of that going on. I think the Democrats like to sort of present it as, oh yeah, there are people that are, you know, taking care of 5 people in their household making minimum wage. Maybe that's the case, but it's a teeny tiny fraction of the population. It's not the way they present it, the way they frame it. I know you're shocked that they lie when they frame stuff like that. Paula Meridian says, so I can start receiving my Social Security benefits at age 65 and keep working, and I won't lose benefits. Paul, you need to figure out what age you need to be to achieve what's called full retirement. Literally, that's what it's called. And at that point, yes, for me, it was 66 years and 8 months. Yeah. That's when I achieved full retirement age. And at that point, I applied for benefits. You get full benefits, and there are no tests of your other income or your assets because you're at the full benefit age. And think about why that's the case. Because you're older and you're not expected to live as long as you would if you retired at 62 when you can. Because then you're getting benefits for, in my case, it would have been 6 years or 4 years and 8 months more. And that's why the benefits are lower. But once you hit that full retirement age, yeah, you get full benefits and you've earned it at that point. And now if you wait even longer, you can get more benefits. Your full retirement age at the full top benefit level. And that's just because you're older, you're not going to live as longer. You're not going to draw benefits, I should say. However God's figured out when you're going to leave the earth is in stone, right? But you're drawing benefits for a shorter period of time. Hope that kind of clears that up. You know, Gerard, in your discussion, it just reminds me of the entitlement like Medicare, Social Security. You pay these all your life through payroll deductions. Then you retire and you've done all the right things and saved outside of Social Security to protect yourself, and you still have to pay for Medicare. And if you have saved and invested to increase your retirement income, you have to pay extra, though. Seems like the productive are always the ones to get taxed. I hear you, Mike, but and I'm just a messenger here. Just remember, the original design of those programs was to be insurance, not income. It was insurance. Social Security, insurance against poverty. Medicare, insurance against use of the healthcare system a lot when you're old relative to when you're young. So you're paying in to protect that. The idea being you're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to buy affordable insurance. And Medicare has expanded. It started out as just hospitalization. That's the old Part A. And then you got the B, which is doctor visits and clinic services. And then under W, we had Part D, which is the prescription drug benefit that was never funded, by the way, which is the criticism. So I hear you. It's just the way it's structured. So, Mike, I know you don't want to hear this, but we could avoid that. And I don't like it either. You got to pay premiums in. I agree. It's not fun. We could have avoided it, and I know this isn't what you want to hear, by paying more in when we were working. Because the reality is, and you've seen this, Rhino, all the surveys and reports bear it out, about 80%, if not 90% of your health care spending occurs in your last couple of years of life. Now, that's a testament to a great extent by all this incredible technology we have that could keep us all alive and treat disease and so forth. It just costs a bunch of money. Fortenberry Physical Therapy says, I grew up on a dairy farm. At that time, minimum wage would have been like living on the lifestyles of the rich and famous. I think I got $20 every 2 weeks. Wow. Incredible. Jeff in Grenada says, catfish in the 80s, $3.35, 80-hour weeks. Farmers didn't have to pay overtime. I thought I was rich. I hear you. Did you see the new speeding law, 50 miles over will land you in jail? Is that in Mississippi? I hadn't seen that.
I think there's a super speeder law going into effect in Florida, but I think it's like 50 over the speed limit and you wind up in jail.
Sorry I didn't get to everything today on the text line. Really appreciate all of the engagement. I'm off tomorrow. I think Dave is filling in. I'm playing golf at Old Waverly. Back with you again Monday. Stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.